Well, this may be not what you expected to see when you plugged in this videotape, but there's a reason for it, and I'm going to tell you what that reason is and why these strange-looking pictures have come up on your television screen rather than what you probably thought you were going to see. This tape is a result of a 1992 request from our friends and Bob and Zita Chase in Mandan to make some copies of tape recordings of material that Hildegarde, their cousin and our friend of ours in Fargo Moorhead certainly, had done over the last several years. And as I got to thinking about making those recordings, it occurred to me that I'd rather go back to the original material and give you good copies of that, if I could, instead of simply copying the tapes that I may have made for you before that I don't even hardly remember. So I have a whole list of it here. There's more than we thought there was. Some of it is original camera material from television tapes I did as a director in the 70s and 80s. Some of it goes back a little bit farther than that, and some of it's more recent. I first met Hildegarde in 1973 or somewhere around there when she came to Grand Forks for a meeting of an organ club group in Grand Forks that I had been a part of, and played some material on an organ that was a home built. That is another story in itself. But the earliest piece of material we have of Hildegarde is a tape that is copied from some material provided by the Chases, and it is a promo that WDAY made on the occasion of their 40th radio anniversary, and Hildegarde was featured in that promo. Now what's going to happen here is behind me are all these tape machines and things, and we are going to record one by one this information and material that we have about Hildegarde and try to tell you where we got it, why we have it, and how it got here. So as I said, the first piece that is coming on your screen is about, well, it's quite a few years old. It was made at DAY's 40th anniversary. It is a black and white optical sound on film promo, for those of you who are technical. And it was made at the WDAY studios. Let's take a look at that.
You know, playing my theme song sure brings back a lot of wonderful memories for me. I'm Hildegarde, and I want to take this opportunity to congratulate WDAY on the occasion of its 40th anniversary. You know, I began my career at WDAY in 1925 with Earl Reinecke. And for the next 28 years, I was part of this great organization as staff organist. You know, the scrapbook in my heart recalls all the friends I made through the years, both at WDAY and with my audience. Once again, may I offer my sincere congratulations to WDAY on its 40th anniversary. And I also want to add that no one ever had a sweller boss than Earl Reinecke. And now, I'll see you in my dreams.
Well, as you can see, that's a little earlier technology than some of the things we use today, although a lot of the things you are going to see are from camera tapes that are certainly not the technology of the 90s, and some of them were copies in the first place. So the quality is as good as we are able to make it. This one, however, should be pretty good. In the mid-70s, when I was a television director, I worked on a program on KTHI called Midday. It was an interview program, and it gave away money. It had dialing for dollars, and the hostess was a lady named Susan Meyer, who liked to do special things, and we were one of the first television shows that went on location in the days when cameras were, well, not as portable as this is, but much lighter than the big studio cameras we were normally used to using. So we went on location and did Midday, and one of the things we featured was Hildegarde.
Our Woman of the Month this month is Hildegarde. Many of you know Hildegarde. You've known her for years. She's entertained you in vaudeville and in silent movies and on WDAY radio. She's a musician par excellence, and it is an absolute thrill for me to meet her because I love music and I've heard so many nice things about her. And here she is on Midday, our Lady of the Month. Hi, I'm so tickled to know you.
Well, thank you. This is a real thrill for me to meet you and to be on your show.
I want to know, how is it that you started out, lived a life basically of a feminist. We talk about the women today going out and doing what they want to do with their lives and not feeling that they have to stay home and live the standard life that maybe the authors, you know, wrote about. And here you did what you wanted to do with your life from the very beginning.
Well, that's true. Of course, I had kind of, at an early age, I played for silent moving pictures.
I know.
And that was fun. And my parents were, well, they let me do, I'm an only child, and they really babied me, let me do whatever I wanted to do.
This was not shocking to them that you wanted to go into the field of entertainment?
No, my mother was a musician, and my father was a musician. Could play any musical instrument, never had a lesson, and I probably inherited a little bit of talent from them. And I've just kind of been on my own. I came to Fargo intending to take an expert accountant course and to drop the music business and got started with a lot of musicians over at the old Stone Piano Company. And I had a chance to go to the Orpheum and take an audition and play over there. And that got me started. They hired me, and so I just dropped the idea of being an expert accountant. And I've had fun with this. It's been a wonderful, wonderful experience that I've been through.
You have met all sorts of people just because you picked a musical career.
That's right. It's been so interesting. You know, there's never been a dull moment. I loved all my years at WDAY, 28 years to be exact.
Now that was organ. You were doing the evening organ program.
And then I was a accompanist, you know, I played the piano, and then I gave recipes, and people tell me that they still use some of my recipes. And this was a wonderful experience. I met so many wonderful people.
And did you take piano lessons like a little 6-year-old kid sitting down and, you know, starting with Hannon and the whole business?
Oh, yes, I should say I did, but my problem was that I could play by ear, and if the music teacher would play over anything for me, well, I just could play it over, and I wouldn't learn the notes, so it was a little bit more difficult to learn the notes.
That was back in the days when piano teachers didn't really like that, right?
No, they didn't like
that. That was a no-no. To be creative on the piano, you had to write it, play it the way that the guy wrote it, right?
That's right. I think one experience I had that you might get a kick out of, I was taking piano, and I was to be in a recital. And it was Professor Boehmer. Many of the older people would remember him at the conservatory, and he wanted me to do a number which I was not prepared to do. And he said, well, you've got to do it. You've got to be in this recital. And I said, well, all right then. And so I got in the middle of this concerto, and I just went blank. But I thought, I've got to go on. So I just put in a lot of stuff of my own stuff and played through, never let on like I'd lost my place or anything, and finished it up, and it was not a real well-known one. I'm not saying that I could do as well as the music, but...
Did you copyright it?
Oh, yes. But anyway, I finished it up, and he came, put his arm around me, and he was so thrilled to think I didn't quit in the middle of the piece, and because I forgot it. But I improvised like I did in silent moving pictures.
I was going to say, that is why you were successful. Being able to, the picture comes in and you sit down and they put it on the screen.
That's
and bingo,
right.
You just play right
That's
then
right.
with right off the top of your head.
Oh yes, there was no rehearsals, and it was just a matter of watching the picture through. Then the second time, by the fourth or fifth time that you saw the picture, where you just about knew what was coming, then you could do a real good job.
Sure.
But in the beginning, it was all fake and fun.
All right, so then you went from piano, you went down to Minneapolis to study organ.
Mm-hmm.
This was because the talking films came in, and then
That's
you
right.
had to. Well, then you went into vaudeville.
Well,
Or do I have
wouldn't
my-
exactly say I went into vaudeville. This is an art in itself, vaudeville. And like I say, I was able to fake it through and to read some of those scripts or those manuscripts of the vaudevillians that were all crossed off and way above the ledger line and everything. You had to be able to just kind of wonder what they were going to do, and so nobody could play it. I couldn't either, but then I
You can improvise again.
And that was a blessing. And they sent me to Grand Forks to play up there for the vaudeville, and to Minot, and I played in Jamestown and Bismarck, and it was not steady. It was like a weekend that they'd have a vaudeville performances.
How do you feel about the stark, well, excuse me, but plastic theaters of today
Well, not
as
very
compared
good.
to these beautiful, wonderful old halls that used to be.
I just can't, somehow or another, I just can't seem to equate the idea that they've torn down these gorgeous, beautiful
Yeah.
theaters. I practiced in one in Minneapolis that was just so beautiful out the lagoon on Hennepin, and I practiced there, and that was a beautiful theater. They had an orchestra and lots of old India themes, the Oriental themes. In the theater, and all these, and they're all gone, and
The
it
chandeliers.
makes me sick. Yes.
Oh,
Well, we had one in the Fargo.
gilding and
Oh,
right?
yes. We had one in the Fargo that they took down that was just so beautiful. It came from Czechoslovakia, I think it was. Probably would be $15,000 now, and they took it down to the warehouse and threw it in the warehouse. I wish I had it.
Oh. All right. Now you are really very modern today kind of lady, out
Thank
of
you.
a generation before today. All right. Except for your courting procedure.
Oh.
Would I embarrass you if I ask you? I think this is the cutest story. Here you are out just doing all these assertive sorts of things with your life until you met your husband, and then what?
Well, of course,
Husband-to-be.
I was playing in the State Theater at the time when he came here, and I was going to leave. I had a very fine offer to go to Rochester in a new theater and be the organist there, and I have to say that when he saw me, why, he wasn't going to let me get away. And if I'd see him coming in, I'd go down the opposite aisle. And finally, he cornered me and he said, "Won't you go out and have something to eat with me?" And I said, "No, I want to practice." And well, he said, "You have to eat." And of course I did. So we went out to eat, and we went to the old Golden Maid. And it was on Broadway, and now that's over with. And as we became acquainted, why, it was kind of love in a way at first sight, I would say almost. And we'd go into this cafe. We had no place to go, so we'd get a booth, and we'd sit there and hold hands and look at each other and order food so we could stay. And the food was just piled up, you know. 'cause
You're not eating the food.
No,
You're
not
just holding
eating.
hands
Yeah,
under the table.
That's right, just so we could stay there because we had no place to go in the winter.
We have moved from your charming porch into your, well, I'll call it your memory room. You have these wonderful pictures of all sorts of people who look familiar. And before you point them out to me, some of these faces, and recollect for me what the names were that I can't remember, tell me what it was like to have Lillian Gish here.
Oh, well, it was just wonderful. She was so charming and gracious and signed autographs so happily, and she was just a wonderful person.
Did
We
you
had
two go
lunch
up
with
in
her.
the, I was going to say, did you two go up in the corner and just laugh about
Well,
old times
no,
and old
I'll
movies
tell you,
and
there
stuff?
were so many people taking her time, and I didn't feel like I wanted to, even though I played a lot of her silent moving pictures. But we didn't have too much time for personal talk because there was my good friend Dave and your friend Dave Knudtson from KTHI and Ted Larson and Lance Johnson and all of us, you know, and everybody took up a certain amount of her time. So I didn't feel like I wanted to kind of take over.
Would you refresh my memory on some of these pictures?
Oh, I'd be glad.
There are some very familiar faces, and I can't come up with the names for anything. Who is the fellow over on the top there?
Well, that's Basil Rathbone. We had lunch with him
yes.
in Hollywood, and he's a great entertainer. I mean, he's a wonderful actor, and we had a real nice time with him. And then
Oh! If I say Dr. Welby, I'm dating myself both frontwards and backwards, but look.
Oh, yes.
That's terrific.
Well, that's Eddie and I, and that's his wife. She's a very charming person, too. And Gig Young, you probably have heard of Gig Young. He's the one that killed his wife in New York and killed
That's right.
himself
That's
because he
right.
felt that he was slipping, you know. He was a great silent film, too, you know, not quite as old, but I mean, he was in silent pictures years ago.
Yeah.
And then, of course, here's one of my favorite with Jimmy Stewart and Claudette Colbert. And we watched them making a picture on the set, and he had just pulled, or she had just pushed him in the lake, and that's why his clothes were all disrupted there. And
His clothes look droopy, but his eyelids do too,
oh,
just
yes.
like always.
But you can see the change. It's how he looks really old now in comparison. He was just a young fellow there.
Is this you practicing?
Yes, that's me.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And there, and there, you look extremely glamorous.
Well, thank you.
Were these pictures that would sit outside the theater?
Well, yes,
Like-
they were just pictures that.
Of who's playing tonight? I mean,
Yeah, something like that. Some of them were in the lobby, and they were just taken. Had them so long, I've kind of forgotten why they were taken. I sometimes wonder even.
that's you playing up
Yes,
at
it
WDAY.
is. Mhm.
And who is the gentleman?
Oh, Maury Waller. How I brought that out, I'll never remember.
Was he on the staff, or
Well, he
was
was
he
a
a singer?
and an announcer, And then I have some of Ernie Brevik. A lot of people would remember Ernie Brevik, too. He was an announcer of mine. And Bill Byrne was really almost my favorite announcer. And now he's at WDAY, and he's really
I met
big.
him when I first came to town. He was the most.
He's
He is the most.
charming
Yes.
man, and his wife is
Exactly.
adorable, too. Just love it. They're all nice.
There you are at the organ.
Yes.
And that is a cowboy I recognize. Who is it?
Tom Mix. And he gave that to Eddie and autographed it. And I think it's nice. And there's Boris Karloff.
Oh gosh, spooky.
Oh,
I mean, he did all the
right.
horror movies, right?
Oh, we could have had our picture taken with lots of other stars, but we didn't like to push in, and we got to see lots more by being a little bit in the background, not trying
Sure.
to push our way into having taken with all the
That's
stuff.
right. Of course you do. Now this tickles me to pieces. You talked about staying in Fargo instead of going on to maybe bigger entertainment.
That's right.
And this picture made it into the national what magazine?
Box office. It said suddenly it's spring, and because the irony of it, we had a bad blizzard, and the title up there said suddenly it's spring.
And that's the Fargo Theatre.
This made the box office. That's the national, American theater magazine that all the inside stories go in that don't go out on the newsstands.
Oh, that's marvelous. Well, that is Fargo.
That's right.
You are one of Fargo's most famous ladies, and you have been an absolutely delightful Lady of the Month, and I do appreciate your taking the time.
Thank you so much. It's been a real joy.
Well, that is, I wish I remembered the date on that. I don't. That's an interview that we did with Hildegarde way back when Susie Meyer was doing Woman of the Year on Midday. I do remember a later one, or an earlier one, depending on when it happened. I think it was later. In July of 1979 at Channel 11, we did a program because of the recent death of Mary Pickford. We used one of her films, scored by Lance Johnson at the Fargo Theatre, and did a half-hour tribute to Mary Pickford on TV prior to the playing of the film. The announcer who did it was Robert Lane, who was very much interested in film, and of course we needed to explore Mary Pickford's career, so we went to three of the people we knew, of course. Lance Johnson, who played the organ, Ted Larson, who knew the films, and of course Hildegarde. And I'm going to play you the piece that came from Hildegarde, and we shot this one in her backyard.
A KTHI movie special, Mary Pickford in Sparrows, with a special introduction on the life, career, and films of America's sweetheart by Robert Lane.
Hildegarde Usselman Kraus is perhaps Fargo's favorite keyboard artist. For years she entertained at the Fargo Theatre, scoring dozens and dozens of films. And with her husband, a local theater manager, she saw firsthand the impact of the Pickford personality.
Oh my, I should say so. She was really a superstar, and was very much loved.
Well, could you see the development in her career as it went on? I mean, did she start with small audiences and then build and build?
No, I don't think so. I couldn't see that. It just seemed to me like she always was a big star, and it seemed like she never got older. She just kept on with these pictures, and she looked like a little girl all the time. In fact, she still looks like did like a little girl.
Well, when you were playing for a Pickford film, was there anything special that you would do?
Well, of course, cueing a picture is a thing, you know. I mean, you played according to the picture and according to the music at the time, and you had lots of incidental music to play, what we call hurry music and sentimental music and galloping horses and trains and all that sort of thing. You know, tried to improvise to make the music interesting with the pictures.
Well, you traveled to Hollywood quite often. Did you ever get a chance to see her?
No, I never did. Of course, like everybody else, we saw her home, but we did see a lot of movie stars, and they were in that same category, the same age, you know.
What was Pick Fair like?
Well, it was just like a great, big, gorgeous castle, and you couldn't get up very close to it, but we had one of the tours. In fact, we were taken there by, kind of one of the big shots from Paramount, you know, in a beautiful limousine, but we couldn't go in, and we didn't ask to go in. This is something that you don't do, you know.
Well, you know, I hear that Mary Pickford was mobbed, especially when she was married to Douglas Fairbanks.
Oh, yes, there's no doubt about that.
You know, people just seem to be crazy about her.
Well, they were. I think that she probably held up as a star, superstar, along with Lillian Gish and some of those people for years and years. And it was quite a shock to people when she divorced Douglas Fairbanks and married Buddy Rogers that was so much younger, but of course that's what kept her young.
The audiences that would come for a Pickford film, were they of a special type, or did she draw audiences from across the board?
No, I think that people just loved her. They just, you know, she was like almost like a little girl and grew up and didn't really change. And it seemed to me like the audiences were the young and the old and some of the intermediate. She just had a big drawing power.
Well, did they ever have to give dishes away and things like that for a Pickford film?
No, I can't remember that they ever did, but that was done a lot. That was done, you know. In fact, I think that was, my husband used to tell me about how theater he worked in Davenport, Iowa, and then he was managing the State Lake in Chicago, and they used to give away dishes, but I'm not sure that it was on a Pickford film. Probably was on somebody that was a little less glamorous and that they needed to draw something in the box office. After all, that's the name of the game, you know, the money.
Okay, kind of fun seeing television as we did it in, well, what is that, about 1979. Not MTV, but pretty good. The next thing on here was taped in 1981. In April of 1981, it was the first time we invited Colleen Moore to come to Fargo and appear with our Silent Movie Night series with Orchids and Ermines, one of her pictures. And who better to score Orchids and Ermines than, of course, Hildegarde. And we featured Hildegarde in concert prior to the presentation of Orchids and Ermine. So let's go back to the Fargo Theatre, which looks like April 23rd of 1981, for a Doug Hamilton from KTHI introducing her, Doug Hamilton with longer hair, and the Silent Movie Night from spring of that year.
He's got it.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another evening at the Fargo Theatre. This time, a very special evening, as they always are, but if it can be very, very special, this is very, very special. Tonight, we give tribute to one of the premier stars of the silent screen, Miss Colleen Moore. And ladies and gentlemen, I can guarantee that you are going to enjoy meeting Ms. Moore and hearing her exciting stories about what Hollywood was like back in the late teens and 20s and 30s, back when Hollywood was inventing much of what we call Hollywood today. And it's an exciting story, and she tells it very, very well. That's part of what's happening tonight. The big part, perhaps, the tribute. But there's something else to remember. Back when Colleen Moore was appearing on the screens here at the Fargo Theatre, back in 1926, when the doors opened at the Fargo Theatre, she was the #1 box office star in the country. Silent films were, of course, the rage. But they weren't really silent. They were accompanied by music. sometimes orchestras, and sometimes this compact version of an orchestra called the mighty Wurlitzer Theater pipe organ. And probably the best, most renowned, premier player of this instrument in this part of the country, ladies and gentlemen, is going to grace the keys once more tonight, as she did during Colleen Moore's heyday on the silver screen. Let's give a very warm welcome to the incomparable Hildegarde. the incomparable Hildegarde. One more bow. Hildegarde is, of course, the inspiration for the Red River chapter of the American Theater Organ Society. She really was the seed that put in Lance Johnson's mind, who is now sitting at the console, a few years ago, the idea to refurbish this magnificent instrument. And to
Well, as I was watching that and getting ready for the next piece of tape, our next piece of tape should be an interview that Hildegarde did with Prairie Public Television. I'm not sure of the date on it, but I was looking for the tape, and I'm looking for it on a recording on the same tape is Silent Movie Night, November 4th, 1982. And after that tape, I shot some pictures in the lobby of Hildegarde introducing herself to friends and so forth. And although these are rather dark because the camera that I was using in 1982 is not what's available now, let's just, you can watch it with me. We'll see what happens.
Where are they?
How do you do?
Nice to meet all of you. Oh, wasn't it?
Sure was. I used to listen to you all the time.
Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Enjoy it.
I'm glad. So our kids are all the same age. See, I'm giving you an adoring look on these things. Oh, I hate to have my picture taken all the time. I really do. You like that picture?
Hildegarde sneaks over our front every time we come over.
Because I remember these.
Well, I was looking for the public television tape, but as I was queuing through this, I found, in addition to that material that's on the tape, something that apparently was done on KTHI about Silent Movie Night. And I haven't seen it, but let's watch it.
Bo Lips, Charlie Chaplin, and Clara Bow, all classics in the 1920s. And last night, the silent movie screen came alive again as the American Organ Society presented a glamour-studded affair. Kevin Wallivant has more.
The Roaring Twenties became reality again last night as hundreds of nostalgia and movie buffs flocked to the Fargo Theatre to celebrate Silent Movie Night. Grand piano and pipe organ sounds filled the air as the young and old prepared for a night of classy entertainment. Ted Larson explains.
It is very exciting. This is the 17th show like this that has been sponsored by a group called the American Theater Organ Society, using the Fargo Theater, which was built in 1926 for vaudeville shows and movies. And a couple of times a year, this very active group in the community dusts off the theater, polishes everything up, and makes it like a night of film going in the 1920s, which includes a feature movie with a star of that period, you know, like Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, Harold Lloyd, Mary Pickford. This time, it's Clara Bow, the flapper girl in the movie It. And then there's always some stage attraction, too. We have Marge Scott's Fashion Parade of the 20s. There'll be authentic costumes with models who will come out and parade around to the music of the theater pipe organ.
June Dobovich has had a hand in Marge Scott's fashion show.
And it started out as just a little kind of a hats mostly. And then it grew, people in town who were cleaning out their attics decided that the best place in the world for their beautiful garments was with Marge, because she takes care of them, such beautiful care of them. And so the show grew. And this is just a very small number of the total number of gowns that she has. And what can I say? They're beautiful, as you'll see.
Stage director Dave Knudtson said the celebration has gone on for years and has now become a tradition.
Oh, I think it's nostalgia. The business of the big sense of occasion, a big special program, and it's rare to see in the motion picture business that kind of thing happening. It doesn't happen for contemporary films any longer the way it was done here in the 20s.
The silent movie It featured the bobbed-haired, saucer-eyed Clara Bow, a symbol of the Roaring '20s. Movie buff Ted Larson said Bow appealed to audiences.
She sort of typifies the era. She's the change from the Victorian woman who was maybe retiring, somewhat shy, substantial, a homebody, to the flapper image, that of the aggressive woman who is out in the world anxiously trying to make a career and pursue a man. And that change in society is reflected by her films and the popularity of those movies at the box office.
Why is the Roaring '20s and silent movie era so popular?
In some ways, could do that in even a stronger manner, because the life of the pictures of this period was so different maybe from the life of the average person. And the medium itself. Today's movies certainly tend toward more realism in films. But the silent period, which of course was not called silent movies in its time, they were just called the movies or motion pictures, has an astounding capture on our imagination.
People in the Fargo-Moorhead area, it was truly an evening of class and good entertainment. For some, the silent movie night was a new experience, but for others, it was simply bringing back good memories. Memories of the '20s revisited. With videographer Mike Clairfall, I'm Kevin Walliman reporting for Campus News.
Okay, a couple of corrections. The concert that you saw Hildegarde do earlier, I think, was with the movie Ella Cinders, Colleen Moore's first picture when she appeared here, rather than Orchids and Ermines, which we'll deal with later. And that was WDAY, not KTHI. And Kevin Wallivan was, at that time, a reporter for Campus News at Moore State University as a student. He has been a reporter for WDAY for a number of years since then. As is evidenced by that tape, we all look quite a bit different than we did in 1981 or 2, whenever that was made. Let's go back to public television, which was our goal in the first place in this segment, and look at an interview that was done by Boyd Christensen.
My favorite people is here tonight, and one of North Dakota's great ladies, Hildegarde Usselman Kraus, who started playing for silent movies back in 1914 in Mandan, North Dakota. And you're still wowing them today, playing piano and organ at various functions. My goodness sakes, you've covered 6 decades with your music.
Now you have to bring up my age,
well, we didn't tell them exactly.
No, that's okay.
But I think I'm correct in saying that you were still very much in demand. You're playing today for silent movie nights. You play for style shows, and obviously you still love to perform.
Oh, I do, and one of the big thrills that I get is playing for people at the country club for their anniversaries and their birthdays and things like that. That's fun to do too.
Now, we got a lot of years to cover, so we're going to skip very quickly over some. Born in Eureka, South Dakota, lived in Hope, North Dakota for a while, Lidgerwood, North Dakota, really raised in Mandan, North Dakota, and that's where you started playing for silent movies in the 8th grade. Now, you told me that you never had a chance to see the movie before you played.
No, that's true, Boyd. The movies just came in a container, and they were put on the screen, and you had to follow it. And somehow or another, if you have that, I don't know whether you call it sixth sense or what it is, but you just watch the screen, and of course the second time it was a little easier after you'd seen it, but you never had a chance to review it.
Did they send music sheets along for you to follow?
No, not for a good many years. Although when I first started at the Orpheum Theatre, which I suppose you want to know a little bit about.
Yeah, we'll talk about that,
they sent some of the music, but It was kind of difficult to read.
Now, I know they're sitting here saying, gee, we'd sure like to hear this lady play. You will. Later on in the program, we've got a great segment taped at the Fargo Theatre at the Wurlitzer organ, so you're going to be hearing that in a few minutes. Your family, you told me that your father, while he had no training of any kind, played every instrument ever brought into your house.
That's right. He was just a natural. He played by ear, and I decided that I wanted to take violin lessons. So I got a violin and took about 5 or 6 lessons, and I guess I didn't have the patience to saw away at that. But my father picked it up, and he could play it. And then I got another craze that I wanted to play the mandolin of all things, and I got that and tried that, brought that home, and my father could play that. He played organ, piano. He played by ear when he'd hear something. Well, mostly he could sit down and play it, and he'd play it, and then I would play it after he did, you know, remember?
Sure.
And by ear was a natural thing for a good many years. And when I started to take lessons, it was so difficult because a teacher would never dare play a segment for me at all, because if they did, well, I would never learn the music.
Oh,
I'd
is that
just play
right?
it by ear.
One of your early training grounds was a music store in Mandan, where you said you made big money dusting pianos and
Yes.
also demonstrating pianos.
That's
What was
right.
the big bucks you made in those days?
Well, this is going to be hard for you to believe, but it was $10 a month. Not a week, but a month.
Okay.
And my father was quite distressed to think his daughter was out working, but I enjoyed it,
All right.
and I thought that was a lot of money.
You had another interesting experience when you were in Hope, North Dakota,
Oh, yeah.
at a church in Hope, and you were obviously a very young girl.
First grade.
First grade? Tell us what happened then.
Well, our home was right near the church. I believe it was a congregational church. I'm not just quite sure. It
Okay.
doesn't matter what church.
Yeah.
But anyway, a lady came over to our house and wanted to know if I would pump the organ for her. Well, it was one of these kind that you pump, you know, have to...
Big handle of something?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and it's hard work.
Yeah.
And I spent most... She told me that if I did, I can't remember, but she said she'd give me a dime or a quarter. Maybe it was just a dime. And I pumped all afternoon until I was just exhausted. And when she got through, she walked away and didn't give me the dime. And, you know, it shows you how children, a child will think about that. You know, I didn't get over that for a long time. It wasn't that I had a depressed child and didn't have anything, but that sounded like a lot of money.
You came to Fargo, sometime in the 20s, early 20s, and your first job in Fargo was at the old Orpheum Theater, and
That's
you tell
right.
me you had rather an interesting audition. They were looking for someone to supply the music for the silence, and what was your audition like for that?
Well, in the first place, I came down to Fargo to take an expert accountant course, and then I didn't sign up, and I was over at the Stone Piano Company. That's before Schmidt and DeVos and all
Right.
got into
Yeah.
the business. And met a lot of musicians over there, and they said they were looking for somebody to play for this silent movie. And it was Marion Davies, and I can't think of who the man was, but anyway, the score came with that. And it was just notes above the ledger line that you couldn't, nobody could hardly read.
Okay.
And they tried out several musicians in Fargo, and good musicians, much better than I ever was, and nobody could read it. So they said, why don't you go over and try it? And I did. And I couldn't read it either, but you know, I could fake it so well. And I knew about what it required with the scenes, having played the sound pictures, and McCarthy Brothers hired me. Just due to that, and I don't even remember what was on that sheet. It did give the cues of what to play, and then I got the idea, and I just faked it and got the job. I thought it was wonderful.
Who are some of your favorites? And really, could you enjoy a movie as much when you were playing in the pit as you could if you just went to the theater alone to enjoy it?
Probably more.
You could.
I think so, because, you know, I got to know, I like different ones, the old silent stars like Hedy Lamarr, and I suppose very few people even remember her, but she was kind of, Hedy Lamarr and Pearl White was tied to the railroad tracks, and they keep coming back to see whether she got away before the train went over her, and I just can't recall all the ones that I liked real well. Douglas Fairbanks Jr., of course, and or the old Douglas Fairbanks, not the junior, but
Yeah.
the one, and Mary Pickford.
Oh,
and
yes. Lillian Gish.
Yes, and Lillian Gish and Colleen Moore. And
Well, that's interesting because in later years, in fact, in the last 4 or 5 years here in Fargo, you've had a chance to meet both Lillian Gish and Colleen Moore.
That's right, and it was a big thrill because we had, the boys in the ATOS had a banquet for both of them, and when they were here.
ATOS, by the way, is the American Theatre Organ Society, and Fargo has one of the greatest groups in the U.S.
I think so.
Yeah.
We
Go
were
ahead, I
all
interrupt.
kind of founders of that. Lance Johnson started it, of course.
But I interrupted
Yeah.
you. You were playing for Colleen Moore.
Well, anyway, she talked about many people that I played for in silence, and recalled a lot of names, and I did enjoy visiting with her, and Lillian Gish was a delight too.
You later went to the Fargo Theatre, and you played there for, what, 2 or 3 years at the Fargo Theatre?
Oh, yes.
All of that? Now,
From the State Theater, I went to the Fargo Theater. They had the big opening, you know, and
okay.
then they had an organist from Chicago for a while, and then I took over and I played there for a long time, and I even broadcasted from there after I quit playing it through WDAY because of the nice organ that was there.
well, the Fargo Theatre has a magnificent Wurlitzer theater organ, which the Theater Organ Society, American Theater Organ Society of Fargo, restored some years ago. Thousands of hours of work went into restoring this magnificent instrument, and we sneaked down there just before coming to the studio today, and you put on your prettiest gown and got the old sheet music out, and we just kind of stood around that organ for a while, or I stood. I just watched and did a little prompting. But this is the result, and we'd like to have you watch and listen now as this great lady of the keyboard gives you some idea of what a Wurlitzer sounds like when it's played by someone who knows how to play it. Let's watch.
Thank you, Boyd. Right now.
Big haunted house on the hill.
Okay, now just a minute.
The shutters, black sky, and a big moon. And you would play.
That's about enough
Oh,
of
you
that.
could just see Lon Chaney walking up there, couldn't you, on that one?
You could just about see, that's about enough of that.
And the storm clouds. Storm clouds in the sky. That's a storm. And poor little Lillian Gish standing on the hill waving goodbye to her lover as he goes off to fight the Civil War. Tears in her eyes, waving. Ah, yes.
Everybody knows Hearts and Flowers.
Oh, yeah, that's a hit. All-time hit parade. The hurry up, what they call it, hurry up music? Everybody hustling to get someplace. Oh, yeah, the chase scene. Chase scene. The cavalry coming to save the wagon train. Charlie Chan, famous detective, makes his way onto the screen with his young son. Are they solving a big case or something or other? And you would play, ah, yes. We can't forget Chief Yawalachi and the many Indians. Oh, a staple to the early movies, yeah. Here they come. Eddie and Marie McDonald. And the famous ender, the people will recognize this. The Archaeopathe News ending. What did they play in between, what you refer to as the incidental music when not much was happening? That's a very familiar sound too, isn't it?
Well, it just, I don't know, just we call it mood music, and I think kind of whatever comes to your mind, you know. That,
you make this up as you go along.
Yes, just make it up as you go along. That's really the best part of playing a silent movie.
You were waiting for the chase scene, you were waiting for a love scene, and we would hear something more.
That's right, just, oh, you mean a love scene?
Well, maybe the incidental between. It's a piece you said you haven't played in a long time.
Oh, yes, that's right. I did want to play that.
Oh, yeah. Because people will recognize that.
Well, I think they will. This is something that I have to have my glasses for. I haven't played it very many times in probably 40 or 50 years, so, you know, it's a little bit...
They'll recognize it.
It's really a little bit touchy.
Familiar tune. That's kind of what they call traveling music, I guess, nowadays. It is traveling music. You mentioned, when we were chatting the other day at lunch, that there's one piece that you do that probably is the most requested song. Whether they ask you to play at a party or you're entertaining friends, and I know it's one of, well, I think it's their favorite because you say you do it a very special way.
Well, I think probably that I'm the only one that does this kind of a exotic or crazy arrangement. But people seem to like it. They always request it every time I play a concert. Why they ask me if I wouldn't play this again.
And it's called.
So here it goes.
It's called The Waters of Minnetonka.
Yes, The Waters of Minnetonka.
Okay, let's listen.
All right.
magnificent piece, Waters of Minnetonka. I was looking at your sheet music. That goes back a few years too, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. Just look at it, so beat up, and it just, I can hardly read the notes anymore. I have to kind of guess at the notes.
You tell me it's out of print, that's why you can't get a new copy.
That's right, I can't, but it's still a lovely piece, I think.
Beautiful sound. Thank you so much for playing for us.
Oh, it was
magnificent.
Just so much, it was
well
so
done.
much fun, I loved it.
Well done. What a kick to stand next to that instrument and listen to this great lady play. That was a fun morning.
Well, it was fun for me
really
too. You know, it somehow or another, having you stand there, it seemed to be easier to do because I could feel that you were kind of knowing what I was doing, and of course you're just that wonderful boy.
I have to share this with the audience. We were taking camera shots from various places around the theater, cover shots they're called, and the director who was directing the shoot, Greg Mattern, said, just, you play anything you want because we'll put these shots in with other music. And you played for 7 or 8 minutes. And I said, what is that you're playing? And you said, well, it's just mood music. I'm making it up as I go along. Now, obviously that only comes with years of playing. You know, I mean, you don't just do that right now.
Well, I suppose. I do a lot of improvising, you know, and I still play by ear, although I've had quite a few lessons. I went to go to conservatory for a long time, and studied in Minneapolis with Eddie Dunstetter.
Sure.
And practiced down there at a couple of big theaters, and Lagoon and the Strand across from the Radisson Theater. And so I've had quite a bit of training, but I think mostly music had kind of come natural for me on account of my father. And then my mother was a music teacher, but hers was all notes.
Sure.
Everything she had to have the notes.
The longest run you had was at WDAY Radio, 28 years,
That's
and you
right.
were, am I right, the first musician that they hired on their staff back
That's right. I was the first
1924.
Yes, to be hired at a full-time, you know, status, so to speak. And I said the only thing I could say was I must have done something right to have lasted that long. That's been used a lot of times before, but somehow it fit in pretty well here.
This is in the days before there were records or tapes of any kind, and so most of the programs on WDAY were live.
That's
now,
right.
you did a number of different shows. In fact, on your shows, you did almost everything, you told me.
Well, yes, I tell you, I did a lot of accompanying. I did for trios and for singers, and then had a religious program whereby every denomination, they would alternate the Sundays, and we would have a singer. Sometime Mary Lou Dunkirk did a lot of singing at that time, and everybody knows who Mary is.
Sure.
And we'd use the music for the church, depending upon what church it was. The minister usually selected the hymns that he wanted to have. That went on for years and years and years.
You did recipes, you told me?
Yes.
You wrote your own copy?
I did recipes, and for Mrs. McShane, I think that was Mrs. McShane's program, and I'd go over to the store and look at the things and then tell people about it and then do a little playing and maybe give a recipe. And there are people that have told me that they won a big thing from one of my recipes, honor, you know, at the fairs, and first choice or whatever they call it, I don't know.
You told me one day you wandered into the studios, the old garden studios, or as they were known at DAY, and there were two nifty young guys on the staff named Manny Margette and Dave Handley.
That's right.
They said, hey, Hildegarde, sit down and play for a while. And you ended up playing how long?
Well, they'd say, come on, fill in for a minute. We have nothing to put in this. Now sit down and fill in. And then, of course, I had no music with me or anything, so I just sit down and fill in the 15 minutes or the half an hour, whatever they needed. And, of course, I never got a penny for it, you know. But that didn't bother me. I just loved to do it.
Well, I know that's true because I heard a story, talk about you were doing it for the love of music. Somebody told me that they had a heck of a time with you at DAY because you never picked up or cashed your paychecks. Is that
awful?
right?
That's true. That's just awful true. I'm almost ashamed to say it, but you know, I just loved it so, and they just accumulate. And Ken Kennedy said, you know, aren't you going to pick up your checks, and then maybe, you know, it'd go on for 2-3 months. You see, the money wasn't everything. It was such a wonderful place to work, you know. There were so many great people. Like I say, Earl Reinecke called me when the theater business was all over with, and you know, for organists and orchestras and stuff, and asked me to come up for the full time, and he was so great, you know, and Ken Kennedy was so much fun to work with, and Frank Scott was up there while I was there, and he was just a treasure.
You told a cute story. A young gal, and you also used to, you mentioned earlier, you played for auditions for young people coming in.
I wish, Boyd, I'd have kept track of that, because, you know, I think I must have taken probably 300 at least auditions for people that wanted to get on the air. And
tell about the one young girl.
Oh, well, I think this is kind of funny. Maybe nobody else has got the same sense of humor, but a girl came up, and Ken was in the room and taking the audition, and I was going to play for her. So usually when they didn't come up with music, and they usually didn't, I'd say, well, what do you play? What do you sing? You sing classical, the popular, what is your voice, and so on and so forth. And so this one girl said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, you must have some choice, because I had to look up the music, you know. And she said, well, I know a half a chorus of Jeannie with the light brown hair. That was her repertoire. Well, anyway, I think I played that, and Ken was watching, so he came out, and very businesslike, he said, we'll call you, don't call us, that idea. But I thought that was kind of amusing.
You retired from WDAY in 1952, was it? End of the 50s? Now, again, you left theaters when the talking films came out, The Jazz Singer in 1927, and I would suppose by 1952 there weren't many live programs left on radio, because you've got discs and tapes. So again, technology tried to replace you.
That's right.
But you didn't stay in retirement very long. I saw your calendar for the month of November, and I think you said the 26th was the only date that was still open.
Maybe you can fix it so somebody will see that I'm busy on the 26th.
But you are still, like I say, you still get many requests to play, and I know a very special night for you was it last year at Weld Hall?
Yes.
Tell us what happened.
Well, I played a silent picture, you mean a Colin Moore picture, and Ted Larson, of course, that has all these wonderful films, and he's so great, and he wanted me to play this, and he said that Lillian Gish, he tried to get a hold of her so she could talk directly to me and maybe thank me for playing her picture, but she was in Africa.
Hey, Lillian Gish or Colleen Moore?
Oh, Colleen Moore.
Colleen Moore.
Excuse me, yes, Colleen Moore, you're right.
Yeah.
So that didn't come through, but it was so much fun, because so many of my friends and people that I didn't know naturally just filled up that Weld Hall, and we turned away a lot of people, 50 or 60, so Ted Larson said, and Dave Knudtson, that are so involved in this.
You got quite an ovation, I understand.
Yes, and it was such a thrill. It was really fun.
You told me, and I found this interesting, you said, you know, Boyd, they gave me a standing ovation, and I really don't know why.
Well, it is true.
Huh?
But it was the biggest thrill. You know, it's just, you can't imagine what a thrill it is, especially, I know that it's, you know, because I'm kind of like the last of the Mohicans or Mohicans, because there are not too many silent picture players left in the world at my age. You know, probably you couldn't fill a hall if you went over the United States, because people, you know, lots of them live a long time, but I mean, I've been so fortunate to still be around and still be able to do this. But this is because of my age, I'm sure, and then because it's a little unique. That's the way Ted Larson puts it, you're unique, you know.
You certainly are unique.
Nice.
You are, and again, that's a phrase I use occasionally, but you're one of North Dakota's treasures. You really
thank
are.
you.
And I know you were nervous about being on this program.
Oh, I was just terribly nervous, but you made it easy for me. I think I've done too much talking almost, because you're so great at it.
Good to have you here.
Thank you.
Hildegarde Usselman Kraus, who spans 6 decades of music. And if you have a chance to hear this lady play, it's a real treat. It's an evening well spent. Thank you for being with us. I'll be back with another guest next week at the same time.
Well, it's actually been a while since you saw me last, although it's immediate on the tape. Several days have passed, and we're going to continue on. Having seen Hildegarde on public television, we're going to television once again, this time to 1986, in August of 1986, when we did the Save the Fargo telethon. And Hildegarde was a part of that telethon. I think you've seen part of this before, but a little extra treat. Let's take a look at the opening of that show.
Our entertainment tonight includes the FM Ambassador Chorus, the FM Community Theater's Good Company, the Makata Dance Theater,
the Red River Dance and Performing Company, the Shook de Fiore Jazz Quintet, vaudeville juggling with the Skip Hunt and Lalo, the Fargo Theater's own Big Band All-Star.
and of course the incomparable Hildegarde on the mighty Wurlitzer Theater pipe organ. And now at the console of the mighty Wurlitzer, Mr. Lloyd Collins.
Well, that's what the beginning of the show looked like. Of course, we saved the best part for later in the program. And when Hildegarde came in the theater to play, the results were pretty predictable. She was introduced by Boyd Christensen.
I guess every show has what you would call a magic moment. At least we like to provide magic moments when we have entertainments of kinds. And the lady I'm about to introduce to you has been providing this area with magic moments for going on 7 decades. She played in this very theater on the mighty Wurlitzer and accompanied silent movies starting back in about 1927. In later years, she was a fixture on WDAY radio back in the days when performances were live and there were no recordings. She has performed throughout the area. She and her husband, Ed Kraus, who managed this theater, made a number of trips to Hollywood, where they were introduced to the largest names in Hollywood as they promoted this theater and the films they showed. You know, talent will carry you a long, long way, and it has carried a number of people a long, long way, but it's very seldom that you see talent mixed also with style and grace that have not only made this lady a great performer, but probably one of the most beloved citizens this area has ever produced. Ladies and gentlemen, the incomparable Hildegarde. Well, I tell you, yeah, isn't that a nice flower? Well, I tell you, we've got to raise $75,000. We can't blow it on roses. You got the green part. I tell you what, you provided us with our magic. I have never seen such an outpouring of absolute and sincere love and warmth from an audience in many, many years. And my dear, you certainly have earned it.
I'm so grateful. I just can't express myself how much I appreciate this wonderful standing ovation and everything. It just, well, it's just almost too much. I can't take it. For one thing, you want to remember my age, and I can't take it. But I'm very proud of this, and I want to thank everybody that participated in this. It's just been a real thrill for me, just really great.
Can we reminisce for just a second? We have about 60 seconds here. Back in the days when you played, I know many times you told me movies would come in with absolutely no accompaniment or musical score. What did Hildegarde do in those days?
Well, you just played, you just watched the screen, and you made up music as you go along. You try to follow the action, and if it was hurry music, if it was running, well, you picked up the music and the love theme, and a mysterioso, when there was a mystery, well, you'd play some of the mystery music, and it was fun.
Well, I think if for no other reason, this theater should be preserved so we have a proper showcase for this lady's talents, the Fargo Theatre, the incomparable Hildegarde. And Hildegarde, to show you the response, and you're in large part responsible for this. Look at the tote board, ladies and gentlemen. $63,472. We're getting close. Right now, don't leave me. Don't leave me. Oh, I so seldom get to stand next to a star. I just love this.
Well, I think you're a star. You've always been a star. You're such a great asset, too.
Thank you.
You've been in so many of our silent pictures, and you always build people up to the point where they can't help but give you a standing ovation. That's what he does.
You're a dear. We're going to take a break right now for WDAY Update, and we'll be back and continue live for another 25 minutes. We've got $12,000 to go. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Good evening, everyone. A marvelous effort underway there at the Fargo Theatre tonight, so join in.
Okay, that's 1986, the Save the Fargo Telethon, which did in fact raise more than its projected goal and did real well. We could use another one of those, actually. Let's move up a little bit to a silent movie night. This would have been in 1988, I believe, in fall of 1988. We did a tribute to Hildegarde, and asked an old friend of hers, Dr. Hansen, who was the drama director or theater director at Moore State University at the time, and he is introduced by Ted Larson.
I know you were expecting Doug Hamilton, but this is a night of surprises as well as tributes. I'm Ted Larson, and for 25 of the 28 silent movie nights, I have walked down the aisle of the theater with Hildegarde. You know, when you walk down an aisle with somebody, you imply a relationship. And I'm here to publicly state what some of you may have suspected for a long time. I'm in love with Hildegarde. And it's no quick romance. It started when I was 9 and used to sit in the balcony of this theater, lean over the edge and hear those special songs that Hildegarde would play. And I wondered all about that marvelous Wurlitzer pipe organ and the films that were on the screen. I grew up to work in film. I teach film at Morehead State University. And when I discovered what Hildegarde could do to a film by Lillian Gish, Colleen Moore, Douglas Fairbanks, Rudolph Valentino, Clara Bow, whomever, I fell in love all over again with film and with Hildegarde. We know that Hildegarde has entertained us royally for 60 years. Have you ever wondered who entertains Hildegarde? Well, I know, and I'm here to announce that publicly too. It's Delmer J. Hansen. In addition to being my boss in the speech theater department at Morehead State University, he has directed 263 plays, the MSU Theater, created the Straw Hat Players, and for many of those opening nights, Hildegarde has been in those audiences. We thought it would be unique, interesting, fascinating, and an enjoyable experience for you if we could bring these two friends together and see what kind of a conversation would develop. So now it is my pleasure to present the incomparable Hildegarde and her very friendly companion, Delmer J. Hansen.
Give them hell. I think the audience, Hildegarde, might be interested in knowing how we first met, which was at a play I had directed, I suppose, 25, 28 years ago. And it was a play in which I had cast a great many women in the department. And up to that point, I suppose I was the typical male chauvinist of the early 1960s. At least my wife tells me I was. And I had always assumed that girls ushered for plays. I had never seen a play ushered by anyone but girls. So I went home for dinner one evening and said to her, I don't know what I'm going to do for ushers for this play. I don't have enough women left in the company to get enough ushers for the show. And she looked at me and smiled and said, well, can't men usher? And I had never really thought about it. And it was one of the many awakenings about women that my wife has brought to me over 30 years of marriage. And so I said, well, fine, why don't you make out a list? Well, she didn't use any of the women. She used all men as ushers. And following that evening's performance, this lovely lady sitting next to me came up to me and said, you're Del Hansen. And I said, right. And she said, well, I just want you to know that I appreciate having all those handsome young male ushers instead of those women. And from that point on, Hildegarde and I have been the best of friends. Shakespeare once said in one of his early comedies that if music be the food of love, play on. Well, Hildegarde's been playing on and on and on for well over 60 years now. And I think the audience might be interested, Hildegarde, in knowing how you got an interest in music. Where did it come from?
Well, I suppose that probably it came mostly from my father because he could play any instrument and never had a lesson. He'd take me to a show or something and he'd come home and could play the theme and then he'd ask me to play it and I could kind of pick along and play, not as well as he did, but anyway, he was very musical and my mother was a very good musician. So I just learned about music at a very early age.
When did you start to play for silent film?
Well, that was in my second year in high school. And we only had, the theater was only open on Friday and Saturday. Sunday laws, of course, prohibited it. And then another thing, I couldn't have played and worked that late at night either, a schoolgirl. And I learned to cue pictures, silent movie pictures, and I want everybody to know that I was well paid. I got 25 cents a night. Probably overpaid.
Well, when I was in high school, I sold popcorn in a movie theater, and I got a penny a box.
I knew you were going to top me. You can't get ahead of this one.
What were some of those early things you played for? You mentioned last evening the serials.
Well, I played for a lot of the old, of course, old-timers, which lots of the names I've forgotten naturally, but I do remember Pearl White that they always ended the picture, the train would be running, and just before it ran over, she'd be on the railroad tracks, and just before it ran over, the train would stop.
And then that would be, come back next week and see if the train ran over her.
Well, I think both Ted and I remember those early serials. I think we get that today on television with Dallas and Falcon Crest.
Probably.
At the end of the season, the plane crashes and we have to wait till fall.
That's right.
To
In
find
that way, it's kind of about the same thing, just coming back a circle again.
Right. You mentioned last night that you came to Fargo, I believe, when you were 16.
That's right. I graduated from high school when I was 16.
One story Hildegarde told me one evening was that when she was in high school, she was taking a class in German, and all of the students had to learn to sing songs in German. Hildegarde played the piano for them, and I've always wanted to ask her, since you weren't really learning German, you were playing the piano, what kind of a grade did you get?
Oh, I got a good grade. I was a poor student, but I got a good grade anyway.
When you came to Fargo, you played in a number of theaters locally, did you not?
Yes, I did. I think probably the first one was at the Orpheum Theater, and that was kind of a funny thing that happened. I went over to the Stone Piano Company. At that time, it was the Stone Piano Company. Maybe some of the people would remember. And they were looking for somebody to cue a silent picture when Nightwood was in Flower with Marion Davies. I wonder if anybody remembers Marion Davies.
Oh, of course. She married Hearst, the newspaper giant.
That's right.
I don't think she married him.
No, but
I think they just lived
had a
together.
relationship, yes. Yeah. They call it now a relationship.
Okay, thank you.
In case you didn't know. Well, anyway, several people, very good musicians, tried out for this. They sent cue sheets and maybe 2 or 3 bars of a suggested piece for a scene. But the notes were way above the ledger line. Nobody could read them. I couldn't either. But somebody said, why don't you go over and try out for that? And I was going to take an expert accountant course and drop the music business. But I went over and I tried it. And I think 5 or 6 different good musicians, much better than I ever thought of being, couldn't do it because it was a silent picture and they didn't know just how to handle it. But I got the job, and I worked there for a long time, until the Orpheum closed.
So if you couldn't read it, what did you do?
Well, I faked it. I just had to kind of think, well, now I wonder what will fit this scene. And you know, there was just a kind of a cue sheet to give you maybe a line or 2 of what might be said, and you had to just imagine. Of course, silent pictures is mostly imagination when you play for them.
We were talking one evening, I know, about the difficulty and the differences between serious film and comic film, and I was telling you that I always felt directing a comedy was much more difficult than directing a serious play. How do you feel about silent film?
I feel the same way about silent film. It's much more difficult to play for a comedy because there's a lot of fast moving in a comedy, and I like to play for a nice, kind of a quiet film that I can use some pretty music and maybe make up something and have a love theme that carries through the whole.
Out of all those film stars you played for, who were your favorites?
Well, of course, I really can't just make any real favorites because I like most all of them, but I like Jimmy Cagney, of course, and Ginger Rogers, and what was the one I told you about that was
the heartthrob of the 20s.
Yeah, that's
Rudolph Valentino.
There you have it. There you have
Yeah.
it. The Rudolph Valentino. And you know, the funny part of it is, most of my girlfriends would always want to come and see Rudolph Valentino.
Do you think they'd still want him today?
Well, I don't know. Mostly he was in the tent, you know, and lying in the and
As I recall, he was usually in the tent with a woman, right?
Right, or lying on the sand.
Oh, on the sand,
oh, yes,
too.
it was all very, imaginative. You had to have an imagination to watch Rudolph Valentino.
Well, Hildegarde, back in 1926, you married a man named Eddie Kraus.
That's
and I've
right.
always had a little bone to pick with you about that.
Oh, really?
And
Tell
that
me
is,
about it.
very simply, that was the year I was born, and I've often wondered why you didn't wait for me.
Well, is it too late?
I'll have to go home and check with my wife.
Okay. Well, Rhoda is such a good friend of mine that I think that she would approve that I said that anyway.
I think she would, too. I think the audience might enjoy knowing some things about Eddie. We know that he was involved in the theater business, but what did he do in Fargo in addition to that?
Well, of course, he was very active in all civic affairs, and he was one of the founders of the Bison Boosters here, along with a couple of others that have passed on, several others, rather. And he came from the State Lake Theater in Chicago and the Hennepin Orpheum in Minneapolis. And he came here with the idea, they sent him here to kind of boost up the theater business. And then, shall I tell you that he met me?
Yes, tell us about it.
Well, anyway, this was at the State Theater, and he'd come down when I'd finished playing for my silent picture, or whatever it was, and asked me out for coffee. And of course, I always made excuses because I had another boyfriend at that time. And but then he persisted. He kept coming down, asked, well, you have to have a cup of coffee. So that started over a cup of coffee, and we'd go to a little restaurant and order food and keep ordering food and ordering more food so we could stay there and hold hands finally. That's what it was, because I was living in a rooming house where I naturally wouldn't take him, and he was living in a hotel where he naturally wouldn't take me. And we fell in love just over all this coffee and no booze either, no.
You think that's a little advice you should give to the young people here tonight?
I don't know. Times have changed so much, Del. You know, you change your mind on a lot of things when you get older. And, you know, I don't pass the opinions on anything that people do. I think...
Excuse me.
Gee, I'm really making you nervous. You know, I didn't think I could make such a wonderful professor as Dr. Hansen is. I could make him nervous.
She's also upstaging me.
I'm so happy to have you here and have you do this interview because it's one of my proudest moments, I'll tell you that.
Well, during the 1950s, I know you and Eddie went to Hollywood, and the film showed the people, and you mentioned some of the people with whom you were with. But you were telling us last evening about Don Amici and Lucille Ball. Mm-hmm. Would you like to tell the audience a little bit about them?
Well, I had really forgotten Don Amici until he won an Academy Award just this last year, I think it was. And he was kind of a young man, but the powers that be had him and his wife take us out to dinner. And then we went to Grauman Chinese together. And here he comes along after all these years and wins an Academy Award. And of course, we got to see lots of the films. We were invited in to watch, like Lucille Ball, her first film. We were there for her first film. And of course, at that time, I thought she was kind of frivolous, and she was playing up to all the men. Of course, I was past that, you know.
Well, of course.
But anyway, I probably would have done the same thing. But anyway, she was the kind of person that it seemed to me like one of the men directors did say, well, she's wants everybody to love her and to like her, you know, and that. But she's very talented, and I shouldn't say anything against her.
Well, you haven't. Does it surprise you, Hildegarde, that so many young people today are interested in silent film?
I don't think so. I think it's almost an education to watch, to guess what's going on with silent pictures, and if the music is compatible with the picture, I think it's an event. And I know a lot of real young people that say they love it.
I think also any good actor And I think they had to be very good, particularly to play in the comedies, in the silent film.
Oh, absolutely.
Simply because of all the demands placed on them. Well, as you look back over this magnificent career of yours, is there anything you do that is different, would be different?
Well, I suppose there would be a lot of things. For one thing, I probably would have, I taken more lessons. I did go to conservatory and took lessons practically all the time that I was playing at the Orpheum, and kept practicing all the time. But I think I would have gone, I could have done better, let's put it that way. But it was fun.
In all of the years that I've known Hildegarde, the one word that constantly comes up when you talk to her is a word she used earlier this evening, and that is imagination. And I've always been very taken with a definition of imagination as being works of art that help to draw us out of ourselves and give us a life that really is not our own, which I think is what silent film, live film, television, the stage does for us. And you've certainly been giving Fargo Moorhead all of your imagination and your talent and your love for these many years. And I know you wanted to say a few words to the audience, so I'm turning it over to you.
Oh, thank you so much. And I thank you so much for doing this. It's just been such a treat. But I do have this little message that I would like to read. You know, there always should be a surprise element in every show, and this is no exception. He doesn't know I'm going to say this. I would like to thank Dr. Delmar Hansen for this interview. Dr. Hansen and Rhoda are my very special friends, and I love them both so very much. Then I want to thank Ted Larson, professor at Moorhead State, who puts magic in everything he does. He has made this tribute to me so very special. Now, what could I do without Dave Knudtson, our theater manager, always helping to make things easy for me? And I want to thank Lloyd Collins, Dave Knudtson, and Lance Johnson for the special organ music. Lance, of course, is the founder of this beautiful Wurlitzer organ. And Doug, of course, was great. And I thank you all for coming to this very special party for me.
Well, I would say... I don't think we should let them escape our conclusion.
Okay.
You see, we decided that in every silent film, and the one you see tonight, the last thing you see in the blackout are the lovers kissing one another.
And so here we go.
Here we go.
How did it go?
I'm getting a little bit out of order here, but I want to backtrack just a little bit to an earlier part in that same show. Prior to bringing Hildegarde on camera, or on stage, I guess, for purposes of the theater, we made a little movie about her, and we showed that movie to our audience, and I'm going to run that for you.
The year is 1920. Douglas Fairbanks is fighting for honor in The Mark of Zorro. Mary Pickford is a major box office attraction in Suds. Lillian Gish is struggling for her life in Way Down East. And a young girl comes to Fargo to become an accountant. Her name is Hildegarde.
I was going to take an expert accountant course. And then I started to go to the Stone Piano Company, the music, you know, they said that everybody that was a musician would hang around the Stone Piano Company. So I go over there and I met a lot of different people that played the piano, and then there was the conservatory upstairs over the Stone Piano Company. And so I decided maybe I'd take a few lessons.
Her imaginative musical style was already fascinating music patrons in Fargo and led her to try her skill at the Orpheum Theatre.
Anyway, somebody suggested that I try out for a picture at the Orpheum Theatre. And they had had a lot of people, musicians, try out that were all real good ones, that were much better than I, much better. And but they couldn't understand what these cues and all that. They'd be just maybe a suggestion of this is a, oh, maybe 2 or 3 bars or something. You couldn't even read it with just not the left hand, but maybe the right hand. And they tried out, and they couldn't do it because you had to have an imagination. You had to make up these. So the different ones said, go over and try out there at the Orpheum Theater. And so I did. And of course, I could make up the stuff, you know. And they hired me.
Hildegarde was perfectly attuned to the magic of the silver screen. Her work at the State Theater brought music, movies, and the man she would eventually marry, Eddie Kraus.
And that's where I met my husband. He came here as the manager of that theater, and he came as just a kind of a, to get things started. He came from State Lake in Chicago and the Hennepin Orpheum in Minneapolis, and he was supposed to kind of get business going. And well, anyway, I was playing there, and he just kind of liked me, and he used to come down with the organ. He asked me to go out and have a lunch with him, and I refused. I didn't really like him. And I would walk up one aisle, and he'd walk down the other. So one night he came down, and he said, now, you know, you've got to have something to eat. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty good. And so anyway, he had a line. I'll tell you, he really had a line. And so then we went out a few times, and, you know, I got to like him. He was a marvelous man, a very good showman. And so we only went together about 4 or 5 months, I think. Got married and lived happily ever after.
Hildegarde and Eddie formed a dynamic team of music and movies that led them to Hollywood in 1939.
Eddie and I, we went to Hollywood, and they wanted him to come out to see what the small exhibitor they would like in pictures. So we got to, we were there 6 weeks, and they paid for our entire time. They come and get us in a limousine in the morning and take us, and we had the breakfast with some of the big stars like Judy Garland that was sitting next to me. We weren't at the table with her, but right next to it. And then we had our pictures taken with Jimmy Stewart and Claudette Colbert. And we had, we could have had several others, you know, as well as we watched the beginning of Lucille Ball's, her first picture. And we stayed there all afternoon. We watched Jimmy Cagney in a picture, one whole afternoon. Everybody was so nice and so good to us. We had a wonderful time.
Admiration for her extraordinary talents has not been confined to the Midwest. She has received accolades from regional and state institutions and praise from the stars themselves. On her visit to the Fargo Theatre in 1986, the effervescent Colleen Moore requested that Hildegarde score her picture, Orchids and Ermine.
Of course, I do love Colleen Moore, you know. She was here a couple times, and she was so dear. And you get so, especially where you're with them, you know, and get to know them, talk to them.
The advent of talking pictures brought drastic changes in Hollywood and a temporary end to the silent cinema. But it also provided a new career for Hildegarde as a radio personality at WDAY.
I was there 28 years, you know. And I loved it. I did everything, music or did programs early at 7:30 in the morning, and it almost killed me to get up that early. But I did. I gave recipes. I played the piano. I played the organ. I took almost all of the people that came up to try out. But I took lots of auditions, and it was fun, you know. And I had a lot of different programs. I had lots of commercial programs. And then I had one at night, the Lady of the Evening. Now that was kind of I had a different meaning in those days.
Her programs were delightful and diverse and provided sparkling entertainment for 28 years. But Hildegarde could not be kept from the movies for long. There was a renewed interest in the silent screen, and soon Hildegarde's enchanting musical scores were being requested across the region. She brought her talent to a new generation of fans who were fascinated by the art of scoring a picture.
Well, yes, I do. I fake it. I don't always play the same thing for the same, maybe the next night. If I do it 2 nights, why, I might see something that I think would be better. Or like I said before, I've even gone so low, I would say that if I saw a little dog, I'd say, play the piece, Where's the Little Dog, Where's My Little Dog Gone?
Hildegarde's talents have brought joy and admiration from generations of fans. Yet the true tribute to Hildegarde's remarkable career remains the lady herself. Hildegarde brings a special magic to her music and to the people around her. She is truly incomparable.
And I just do. I love people. I just can't find anybody that I could say that I didn't like.
Well, let's go back now to the program just before that, where Hildegarde was interviewed by Dr. Hansen. There were a lot of surprises in that show, and here's Doug Hamilton with one more.
And we have lots of surprises tonight, and one of the most special moments is coming up right now. I would like to introduce to you now the mayor of Fargo, the Honorable John Lindgren.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you. Doug and Hildegarde, I have a proclamation which outlines many of the wonderful and lovely thoughts that have been expressed in these 2 evenings here at the Fargo Theatre. The proclamation reads in part as follows. Whereas since 1926, audiences have thrilled to the music of Hildegarde, whether at the piano or at the organ. And whereas Hildegarde continues to inspire people and is asked to play for music clubs and style shows every week, and I might mention, I think she has a few open dates in May if anyone's looking for a program. And whereas for the past 10 years, Hildegarde's appearances here at Silent Movie Night have brought her unique artistry to a new generation of music lovers, and whereas much of the inspiration to restore this facility has come about because of the admiration this community has for Hildegarde, our favorite show business personality, we therefore proclaim this to be Hildegarde Usselman Kraus Week in the city of Fargo. Hildegarde.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I just want to thank the mayor for this honor. I am so pleased, and I want to thank all of you for coming to this special event. It's been a great thing in my life.
Great. We'll see you later. 20 some odd years ago, I remember being in the Fargo Theatre, and I was watching a James Bond movie. I think it was Dr. No. And I was wondering what this thing, this Hulk, was under the canvas over in this corner. Well, I found out yesterday that what was under that canvas is now up on the mezzanine. The original organ, the original Wurlitzer theater pipe organ for the Fargo Theatre, installed in 1926, is that instrument. It didn't play after the late 40s. It was put under a canvas cover and much abused, but with a lot of loving care, a lot of reconditioning by some very skilled craftsmen led by Lance Johnson, it plays again. It's a brand new instrument that has a lot of years left in it. Now, on this particular instrument, there is an inscription, and I'm going to read to you right now what that inscription is. It says, "This Wurlitzer was played by the incomparable Hildegarde Kraus, beginning in 1926, and is dedicated to her remarkable musical career." Ladies and gentlemen, the incomparable Hildegarde Kraus continues her remarkable musical career. She is in the pit, preparing the organ, and tonight, for your enjoyment, once again, I introduce to you the incomparable Hildegarde.
Okay, there's so much of all of this that I'm finding things I didn't even know was here too. As I've said, there's a whole, in the next room, there's a whole wall of videotape that we've made over the years, and I think we've found most of the highlights for you. There's one more show here. Well, there's a couple more, but this one was made in, I believe, 1987. It was a November of 1987 show, and I don't know what we were doing, but I played the opener as a tribute to Hildegarde, and then Lance was involved in it, and then Hildegarde played, and we all three got into the act. It was just one of those fun evenings where we were just jamming and having a good time. Let's take a look.
I remember the first time I introduced her in this theater in 1974, when she walked into a standing ovation, and I still get goosebumps when I think about it. And I believe the remark I made, I thought I heard the Wurlitzer organ sigh as this lovely lady walked down the center aisle. And I guess the easiest and best way to introduce her is just to say, ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, the incomparable Hildegarde.
Okay, that's not the only time Hildegarde and I played together. Of course, right here in this theater, you can't see off camera, but over here, as I guess you know, there's piano and organ, and we've spent a lot of time just having a good time down here. The most recent one in 1993, in January, when Hildegarde came here for an American Theater Organ Society meeting, and once again we just sat and jammed for a little while and had a good time. Probably one of the best of those times was the noon concert, when we used to do the final noon concert for 2 or 3 years in a row, I believe we did, and by the time we had stopped doing it, the last year we did it, we built an audience of about 700 people that would come to see her play down there, along with the piano. Well, the last public performance she did, most recent one, and I don't even have a date on this, but it's about 2 or 3 years ago, when as you know, I work in 2 small country churches on Sundays as an organist, and Shelley, Minnesota parish. When Hildegarde was asked to come out to the country one and play piano and organ with me some years ago, she gladly did that, and when we rebuilt a piano in the basement there, she came out and played for a special thing that we did with that. And most recently, some young children who are in the Luther League wanted to do a fundraiser a couple of years ago and asked us if we could help. And so I said, sure, we'll come up with something, and we took Silent Movie Night on the road. We did a lot of things, including the sing-along, the organ concert. The organ from here, which is not exactly portable, came out and went up the stairs and into a truck and went to Shelley, and Hildegarde and I played. That was the last public concert she did in sort of a formal. Of course, she still continues to do many kinds of private things and at Americana and so forth. But here's a look at way back in a couple of years ago. It's time to introduce our special guest of the evening, a lady whose name is probably familiar to many of you. She began in theater at the age of 16 at the phenomenal wage of 25 cents a night, playing for silent movies, and eventually became staff organist for WDAY Radio in Fargo. And we've asked her here tonight to recreate for you some of the things that were done on radio, from the peppy tunes of the 20s to beautiful ballads, and a few things that are her favorites and mine that we like to play together. So our special guest, Hildegarde Usselman Kraus, our own incomparable Hildegarde. Well, I'm sure by this time the tape is about full, and you've been sitting a long time if you've watched all of this in one shot. That was done with an amateur video camera and so forth, and not exactly ideal lighting conditions, so we know that images might not be what you'd like. There's also hours and hours of audio tape too, but that's another program. The rest of our, if this is the short subject, this last few scenes we've shown you, then the feature is here. There are two more. But these are going to be on the tape that it's marked number 2, and these will be, let's see, a silent movie night from 1984 where the big band played, and the program consisted of a Chaplin movie, a Harry Langdon movie, and a Harold Lloyd movie called Number Please. And Hildegarde scored the Harold Lloyd movie. Now, I think these are rehearsal tapes, but I'm not sure, so we're going to show you that. And then you heard us mention Colleen Moore in Orchids and Ermine on some of these recordings. And that movie was used at Weld Hall at Morehead State University for a special summer cinema program, and Hildegarde played the organ at Weld Hall for a score for that picture. That score was captured on tape and has been added to the movie, and that's your featured presentation for night after this movie. I hope you've enjoyed a little look back. I certainly have learned a lot about what I have in my own library. I really didn't know that all this existed until I started digging, but I'm pleased that anybody who's watching it who might be familiar with what we do here, if you've had a good time, great. Come see us at the Fargo Theatre. That's all.